And Tim Costello from World Vision joins us this morning. Tim, good morning to you. Now, what's on your mind?
Bread prices in most of our capital cities have gone up some 39% in the last year. Potato prices nearly 80%. And if you're on a fixed income, you really feel that.
The global food crisis is really an unprecedented event. We've never seen so many forces come together at the same time to put extraordinary pressure on the poorest people on the planet.
Imagine if we got news there was a little girl all alone in the desert, hungry, thirsty and dirty. Would we save her?
The World Bank's estimated there's probably another 100 million people affected, and by affected I mean forced into extreme poverty.
10 million Kenyans, that's 30% of Kenya's population, are on the brink of starvation. I mean, think about it, that's half of Australia's population.
So that's a lot of people to be affected quickly, and the estimate was that 7 years of poverty relief was undone by this food crisis very quickly.
Something like 20% of the kids in Kenya have been identified as malnourished, and 1.5 million children are at the risk of starvation.
Where's it mainly happening? Well, a lot of it is in Africa, a lot of it is in sub-Saharan Africa. In other parts of the world, certainly higher prices have been causing problems in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan in particular has been hit very hard. We've seen a lot of civil unrest in 40+ countries at different times. World grain stocks have been run down to very low levels.
In January, the government declared national emergency as the country faces a shortfall of 5 million bags of maize.
Let me repeat that the government will not allow any Kenyan to starve.
And in fact, some governments even got to the stage where they started banning food exports.
And a lot of this has to do with a simple fact. that people can no longer afford to eat.
One factor at work this time around as well that we've become increasingly aware of is the whole issue of climate change. We are seeing really clear evidence that droughts are coming around more often, and we look at the Horn of Africa, we look at a place like Kenya, where you now have an estimated 10 million people who are facing food insecurity because of drought. We're seeing more extreme weather events like floods, and it's clearly a pattern of deteriorating and more volatile climate.
You see, when I was a young kid, or when they were young, rain used to come at specific months. But right now, we expect the rain and it's not coming.
The drought cycles are getting shorter. When it does finally rain, the water just sweeps everything away. The houses, the possessions and the seeds that the families have just planted. And people watching the news at home say, why do you need our help for a drought? Didn't you just have a flood?
The big one that's caught a lot of people's attention is the rise of biofuels. Where does the ethanol come from? Well, in the case of the United States, it comes from corn. So possibly 30% or even more of US corn production, and they're a very big corn producer, is going into ethanol.
Did you know it takes 232 kilos of maize to fill one full tank of ethanol? Now that's as much maize an African person consumes in an entire year.
Biofuels seem like a terrific idea. You're growing fuel, it's green, it seems ideal. But we've realised that at least where biofuels are at the moment, they've got a lot of negative consequences for the poorest people in the world.
So basically we're feeding our cars before we're feeding ourselves.
Then we've got just the basic fact that the world's population is growing by 1.2% a year. That means about 75 million people or more coming into the world each year in net terms. So they've got to be fed as well.
I've been chatting with locals and they all keep telling me how it's getting more and more difficult to feed their families. But then I hear that up north, near the Ethiopian border, people there are getting much more desperate.
How are children keeping their spirits high?
Thomas's father is so malnourished he can no longer eat. He's 400 kilometres away in the city, trying to get some treatment. And in the meantime, Thomas is head of the house. He and his brother eat one meal a day, and it is obvious that it has been that way for quite some time.
Most days, these guys don't get enough food to feed their family. Tomasi here goes to school crying because he doesn't understand that his family isn't hiding food from him. He doesn't understand the concept that maybe there's just not enough food to go around.
What we feel here in Australia with our bread and potatoes, they're feeling literally with their loss of food. That's really what's on my mind today.
In the Horn of Africa, for example, what we're seeing is grinding down of people because of having to eat less, having less nutritional intake, having to have smaller meals. Sometimes it's the women who are hit hardest. They're just cutting back their meals and just having one very small meal a day, possibly every second day. So it's a really hard, grinding situation for these people.
Getting my hair done here. Now put as a hairdresser. Oh, she's dancing. She's remembering the dance from last time. Gosh, she's so tiny.